I don't care how smart you are as an individual. The collective is always smarter than the individual. I've had the good fortune of working on all the Olympic projects for Coca-Cola since the 96 Olympics in Atlanta. And I also work on all the FIFA World Cups for them, doing their activation around those events. In my world, if a project manager disappeared for 6 weeks, it wouldn't matter because the people know what to work on. They're going to hold themselves accountable. They know what the task was. They don't need me there riding herd. My job as a project manager is not to micromanage. It is to say, what obstacles are you facing that you need my help with?
What led to you doing the work that you're doing here today?
It was a circuitous route for sure. It's not what I envisioned when I was 6 years old. That's certain. When I was a young kid, I wanted to be an engineer. That's kind of what I'd always wanted to be, was an electrical engineer. I would check out books I'd ride my bicycle to the library and check out books on robotics and lasers. And to date myself, this would have been the late 70s, early 80s. So computers weren't out yet. Everything was still analog, right? There's no digital. And I would read these things and really was interested in that, but didn't have any money to go to college. So right out of high school, I joined the Navy. Spent 6 years in the Navy and got out of the Navy and went to Georgia Tech. I got accepted to Tech to get a double E degree and was able to do that. And then right after that, I went to work at Coca-Cola. So I walked across the street from, have you ever been to Atlanta? Yeah, Georgia Tech dominates one side of the corner and then the other side is Coca-Cola. So it's easy. It was an easy commute to go over to Coke. Really liked my time at Coke, but then I wanted to work on the Olympics in 96. 94, the city of Atlanta got awarded the 96 Olympic Games. So I wanted to work on that project. So I left the company and went to work for Project Success because I knew they had the contract to do the Olympic project for Coca-Cola. So I was going to do that just for a couple of years and then go back to Coke. But 30 plus years later, I'm still doing this job and I love it so much.
Oh, that's fantastic. The way I think about it when I was going through getting ready for this podcast is project management. To me, the way you're doing the work is sort of more intentionally and effectively creating holistic value within an organization. So you complete the project on time. The material value is there for sure. The financial piece of it, getting challenging things done through a team. That elevates self-esteem. So positive emotional energy is there as well through leadership and all of it. And then a spiritual value creation bucket, the connectedness piece of it, you're just strengthening these connections between these team members that can go on to, accomplish even bigger things going forward. And I'm not sure why project management is seen as a commodity like we were talking about before we got started. And kind of, in some ways, it's like a necessary evil. Who can we get to do this? I look at it and say, oh my gosh, this is so foundational to creating value for a business, i.e. continually increasing the value of the business over time. So why did it get its reputation kind of the way it seems to be seen today?
When I first got started, I don't think it didn't feel like that. It was very much, the people saw the benefit of what you were doing because you brought some structure from what was a chaotic environment, and you helped them get their arms around the project and then get it done. But then as it became more mainstream, because again, I started my career 30 plus years ago. So as project management became more mainstream, I think you get more players in the game, and it did become commoditized to a certain extent. Now, what I think is interesting is the way I like to say it is, look, if you just need to check the box that you're doing project management, then you can get anybody, because then you can check the box and say, I got the lowest price available and this was great. They're going to check the box for project management. You'll get a Gantt chart or whatever that looks like. Right. Or the way I also like to think about it is, if your butt's on the line, if you're going to get fired, if you don't get this project delivered on time, or you're going to lose a client, your company will lose a client because you didn't deliver as you promised, then probably you need a little bit more structured, rigorous approach. And suddenly it's not based on price. It's based on, do I deliver what I say I'm going to deliver when I say I'm going to deliver it? And I think that's really the caveat is, if it's just check the box, then anybody will do. But if you are going to be judged on success or not, whether you deliver, and it could cost you a career, it could cost you a promotion, it could cost you a client, then you probably want to use more rigor. And it's not Joe equals Joe at that point. It's, what does the background look like? What's the experience look like? How long have they been doing it? Then all those things separate and really truly add the value you're talking about. And I think, to build on something else you mentioned about the people side of things, when I look at project work, I look at project management as really, there's two sides of the coin, right? There's the people side and there's the process side. And everybody wants to focus on the process side, which is activity A takes 5 days, followed by B takes 5 days, followed by C takes 10 days, total duration 20 days, right? That's the process side. That's math, basic stuff. Anybody can do that, right? To me, it's how did you get to A, B, and C? And then who owns A, B, and C? Because A might be done by Joe and B is done by Fred and C is done by Jane. And each one of those people get motivated in a different way. And you have to talk to them in a different way. Some people like to feel the pressure. Some people run away from pressure. So you have to think about, how am I going to talk to this person? How am I going to pull the information out of that person that I need? Sometimes I have one client who says that half my job is going back to the old Charlie Brown cartoons. The psychiatrist is in, here's, give me your nickel, because I just listen to people. And my job is to sit there and listen to them. Sometimes they just need to blast, right? Just vent. Then you can get to the business at hand. So those are the kind of things that I think if you're just trying to check the box, you won't get. So I think that's really what causes it to be a commodity.
Yeah, I see, and you don't know a lot about me, but I've started 8 companies from scratch. One was a global aerospace business, had 500 team members in one location, but then people dotted around the world, thousands of customers in 60 countries. It was an incredible business. But there were lots of projects to be completed. And we'd always start with, this is what completed exactly looks like. And then in my brain, it was always managing the project by milestones. And all milestones were critical because a day late, as you talk about in the book, the whole project's a day late, day early. The whole project can be a day early. But also, sustaining it as a project, like, keeping the ongoing value created happening and improving over time. So I think about both sides of that, and every company is just a collection of projects being managed, to completion, to put something in place, and ongoing to continually create the value. Is that in alignment with how you think about it?
Oh, 100%. A lot of our clients are technically oriented. Like you said, Caterpillar is one of our clients. And of course, we do big projects for them, or we do some work in the semiconductor space as well. And when you're doing these projects, time matters, deadlines matter. But the other key that you're talking about really is the people side, in that I could probably take an old project plan that's very close. Like, you had multiple projects over the whole time you were doing that at that company. You had probably hundreds and hundreds of projects. You could have taken one that was similar to the last one and just blew it off, blew the dust off, and changed the name of the project title and say, here we go. But the problem is that the reason that doesn't work is because the people assigned could be different. Their availability could be different, which then drives the duration to be different. Different people have different strengths and weaknesses. And of course, we always work to maximize our strengths, minimize our weaknesses. So you and I might do the same exact thing. We might do it in a slightly different way, because maybe I want to do this piece first because I hate it. I just want to get it out of the way. And that's going to let me do the other thing I like. And you might say, no, I like to do this one first because I enjoy it. And that'll maybe give me some data that I can use. But in the end, we deliver the same result, right? So and what I can't do is I can't dictate to you how to do your work, because you're going to be the best expert in how you need to perform, how you need to do your work. And you might say, well, a functional manager or technical manager should know what all their people are doing and be able to assign durations. I don't think that's the case. You have hundreds of employees, or maybe it's just dozens under your direct control, but you don't necessarily know on any given week everything that person's working on, but they do. And you may not realize that they've been pulled off to work to solve some customer issue that's come up, but they do. And Joe might be this great guy who is willing to work weekends. What you don't know is he's got his kids this weekend and he can't do that. So again, you have to look at the people whose name is going to be on the activity and say, what do you need to do this work and how long do you need to do it? Because they would be the expert at that. And so to me, it's about team-based, collaborative project management planning for purposes. But the other thing you said was really important, is the plan is just the plan. And one of the excuses we hear all the time is, yeah, the plan's just going to change, so why bother doing it in the first place? Because you can't just wander around the wilderness blindly. You've got to say, I'm going to go west. The team has decided west is the best direction to get us to our goal, which you also said very importantly, we have to know our goal, right? What is our final objective? What does the end really look like? And we decide to walk west. Well, because it's a collaborative team, somebody's going to say, wait a minute, this isn't working. We might be 2 or 3 days down the path and they go, we're getting further away from where we want to go. We need to course correct. And that's why you have to have these weekly or every 2-week meetings where you say, well, here's the plan. The plan was fantastic, but it's static. So based on where we are today, where are we on this map? And then if things are done, great, mark them off. If things are not done, when will they be done? Or, hey, what do we know today? We didn't know 2 weeks ago when we built this plan. We need to add that and make sure we're still on track. So a project plan is a living, breathing document that's going to change for the life of the project. So anybody who thinks that once you get your plan put together, it's cast in stone and never changes, nothing can be further from the truth. If you have a plan that's not changing, something is wrong.
Yeah. Well, what I like about what you're saying is they have to own it. If we just give it to them, and then it can even sort of morph into what I call malicious compliance. Well, I did the 4 things you told me, but they didn't own the end result. So I'm a super fan of this is we all get together and what the end result looks like. And you talk about in the book your 3 or 4 day process, everybody in person at the beginning to really get commitment around what it looks like, and then we're off. But they have to own it. Talk about that 3 or 4 day process. My guess is it could be 2 to 4, depending on the team, and the project could be longer. But talk about that and its importance in getting that ownership.
So that's another. I'm glad you brought it up. That's another key complaint people have is, I got real work to do. I can't afford to go spend X days in a planning session. That's a waste of my time. And so the thought is the reason we bring everybody together. There's a couple of reasons. One, as you alluded to earlier, if I'm a team member, I'm probably a team member to more than one project, but none of those project managers are my functional manager. They're not the ones who give me pay raises and my job reviews and all that. That's my technical manager, my functional manager. And I've dotted line to your project and 5 other projects. So here we are, we're in a matrix organization where the project manager doesn't have any formal authority over the people on his or her team, can't make them do it. So to use your exact words, they have to own it. They have to be accountable to themselves. They have to decide this is something I need to do, and here's how we're going to make it happen, right? So the way we drive accountability is we find if we ask people 3 things: identify your task in your own words so they make sense to you 6 months from now, because I can tell you what I think it is, but I'm not the one doing the task. I need you to make it your words so it's recognizable to you, completely out of context, 3 months from now. Second thing I need to know is your predecessors. What do you need from other people? And this is where this is one of the many reasons why I bring people together at the beginning, is because I need to be able to look over at the other person and go, well, I need this from you. And you're going to look back and say, no. That doesn't come from me. This has always been a problem. It comes from Jane. Jane gives that to you, and you're always asking me, and I'm the wrong person. But if we do that virtually, that's just big, long email chain that never gets answered. But when you're in a room together, you get the answer in about 30 seconds. So that's another reason we like to have people in a room. And then the third thing is we get to what is the duration that's going to take you? And that other argument can happen about, well, I think it's 10 days. That person's boss said it's only 2 days. That conversation happens in that meeting where we agree it's 8 days or whatever it ends up being, right? So another reason why we need to bring people together, and this is probably the crux of it, I work on a lot of global projects, and so it's difficult, but the reason we find you can get people together at the front of the project is people say it's a cost. Okay. I say it's an investment, because we're going to spend the money to fly people together or drive people together, be around for 3 or 4 days together. But that's going to save you 6 months on the back of the project. And I got to believe the value of the project is 6 months saved is going to make this 3-day investment not even a rounding error. You're not even going to see it, right? And here's a great example of this. So I did a project for a semiconductor company in Silicon Valley, and the design engineer and the test engineer had worked together virtually, never seen each other, never met, but worked together virtually for multiple years. I think it was 5 years. And if you're not familiar with this industry, what happens is you want the person testing the chip to not have been involved in the design, because that if you involve in the design, you have some bias, right? You understand how it's supposed to work, so you might not be able to break it. What you want is somebody who has no idea, so they can try to break it. And so we're in this meeting, and this is a side conversation. It's not even the point of the meeting, right? We're doing the planning session. And on a coffee break, the test engineer and design engineer are having a conversation, and the test engineer says to the design engineer, if you change this one thing, we could save half of our test time. Now, that conversation could have happened anytime over the last 5 years, but it didn't until they were in a room together, face to face, having a conversation. And the other part of that is that I talk about in the book is maybe I like you, Lee, and I've met you virtually, through email for a long, long time. But I've got I'm working on 7 different projects right now, one of which happens to be some work for your project. And it's Friday at 7 o'clock at night. I've already put in 65 hours this week. I'm tired and I haven't gotten to the tasks that I need to do for you. I don't really feel bad though, because I did 65 hours this week. I've done more than my fair share. And it's not my fault. My fault. My boss getting more work than I could possibly get done in a week. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'll just get to it next week and it'll be fine. So Tuesday of next week, I finally get it done, send it off to you and say, Lee, sorry it's late, but hope you and the family are well. Let me know if there's any issues. And then all I know is you do your stuff to it. Then the company sells a product. The money, everybody makes money. Everybody's happy, right? But then we bring everybody together into this planning session that we talk about, where we come face to face for 2, 3, 4 days. And on some of them, it could be multiple weeks if it's a really big, huge project. But let's say it's just 2 or 3 days. And over that 2 or 3 days, I finally get to meet you face to face. Hey, Lee, it's great to put a name with a face. How you doing? We have probably a couple coffee breaks together. Maybe we have a lunch together. Maybe we have a team dinner. And over that 3 days, I get to replace Lee at acmecorporation.com with Lee at acmecorporation.com that has 2 kids, my kid's age. And our daughters both play soccer. Our sons both are, do singing professionally, whatever those things are, right? I get to contextualize you. You no longer become an email address. Now you're a living, breathing human being that I feel some connection to. So let's say we go back into the project meeting and I see the critical path up on the board. And if people don't know what the critical path is, it's basically the set of activities that if they're late, the project will be late. And usually it's about 10% of the activities in a project. At least our findings over 40 years have been that about 10% of a project will be critical. The other 90% can be late by at least today. And you'll probably be okay. So we get back in there and I said, well, this doesn't make any sense. This says that my task feeds into your task and we're both critical, but I know for a fact I was late last time and the project got delivered on time. And Lee looks at me and he says, you're right, Clint. You were late. I remember exactly how late it was. It was 3 days late because I had to work 2 weekends in a row to make up for your lateness. And I got to tell you, I know Clint's 5 letters, but around my house, you were a 4-letter word for those 2 weekends because I had to miss this big event in my daughter's life, big event in my son's life, all because I had to make up for your lateness. Well, now I feel bad. And so what happens when I go back to Atlanta and you go back to California or wherever our bases are, you're still Lee at acmecorporation.com, but now you're Lee that I feel responsible to. And I want to make sure I'm not the reason you miss some big event in your kid's life. So part of the magic sauce of getting people together is we found the relationships to get established over those 2 or 3 days. We can now run the project remotely for 18, 24 months, no problem, because people are going to hold themselves accountable to each other because they've made a relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of times they just don't know. Something else comes up that they prioritize. Hey, this is more important. I'm sure that isn't that important. But small misses can have giant ripples, going out there for sure.
There's some tasks that could be late by 3 months and it won't matter. And there's some tasks that can't be late by a day or it won't matter. So you have to know which ones.
And they can be really small, seemingly, but they fit into something that's critical that has to be done before they can move that forward.
Yeah.
I was listening to your podcast and conversation with Keith Ferrazzi and loved his definition of a team. It's anybody required to accomplish a project, get something done, create value, all of that. So then the question becomes, what are the best ways to have that kind of influence? I mean, you have those that report to you, and I don't even like the word control. It's like we're all working on creating value together, but you have more influence over them. But now you're trying to influence others, and it could be within folks in one location, virtually across the country, around the world, multiple business units that have to work together. How do you think about developing that kind of influential leadership, if you will, to complete complex projects or on an ongoing basis create value?
So I think it comes back to having relationships. And for me, the best way to do that is to have face-to-face, in-person conversations and build a project plan collaboratively so that people understand exactly where they fit in the overall matrix, if you will, and how some of their tasks can be late and it won't matter, but some, even if it's only a 1-day task, but if it's late, the whole project gets delayed. And we find that that's really helpful to have them understand the overall project. And so that's helpful to have the face-to-face as much as possible. Now, I work on a project right now for the last 3.5 years, and we weren't able to get everybody together at the front end. And I got to tell you, it's just proven out everything I've ever thought over my 3+ decades of doing this, because it's a lot harder. You don't have it's a lot harder to build the relationships, especially if it's somebody that's in a different country, it's a different time zone. You don't see them as often, as far as even on the Zoom calls. They're not, you might only get them for just a few minutes instead of the whole thing, because they're in and out, because they have so many other things to work on and they're a different time zone. And it's just a lot harder. So you have to be proactive about setting up a time. Hey, I just need to chat with you for 5 minutes. Here's why this is important. Here's how we think you fit into the overall matrix of the project plan. This is what I heard you say. Is this right? So it's a lot more rework that goes on that way, but it's the only thing you can do, because it's at the end of the day, they don't work for me, right? Even though I'm the project manager for this project, they don't work for me at all. They work for their functional managers. I'm not even a company employee on this project, right? So, which makes me even lower down the food chain. So what I try to do is establish relationships, and people want to do the right thing. And I find that most people in the world want to do the right thing. And if you give them what they need to do that, be successful, sometimes it's a matter of saying, look, you got 7 things that are on the list. Turns out 5 of them don't matter, at least not this week. Next week, maybe, but this week you can blow those off. These are the 2 things I absolutely have to get from you this week, or you're going to be the reason we're talking next week about why we're late. And people appreciate that and say, well, if you could tell me that information, I'm more willing to help you, because now I know which ones are the ones that are going to keep me out of trouble and which ones I have some flexibility on. So I think that's really the key, is building those relationships.
Yeah, and so many things you're saying sound like common sense, like this is what you do and going forward, but it really isn't natural for a lot of leaders. So maybe a little bit, if you could, on how to think about setting up for it. Because as I'm listening to you, it's like, okay, we need to achieve this end result. I need an upfront commitment on it. I need to identify everyone that is going to be required to make that happen. So I'm listing this thing out. And then I'm thinking about mindset and capabilities I need to build to develop relationships and do all this other stuff. Most, in my experience, they'll shoot an email off just assuming it'll get done. And then they get there right to the end and the project didn't happen. It could be as small as, like you were talking about in the book, getting a meeting room ready and finding out the door's locked and you can't get in. How embarrassing to have the boss come in and like, I couldn't get in the room. Or it could be wildly complex going forward. But just a little bit, if you could, on just how to think about setting that up.
So you laid out a lot of it actually pretty well. It's basically a matter of who needs to be involved. And so what I like to do is, if I can't get them face to face, which is 95% of the time, we do it face to face in a room together. But if I can't make that work, then I have to almost like interview them and say, what is your piece of it? And I build a plan based on what they said. I send it back to them and said, this is what I heard. Is this correct? And then we then I get another meeting where we bring everybody in, at least on the team call or Zoom call, and say, here's what we've talked about. Is this correct? And have people give feedback. And somebody will inadvertently almost always say, oh, well, that's actually Jane. We need to get Jane involved. Jane's not here, so let's just kill it. No. Let's do everything we can without Jane. And then we'll bring Jane back in at a future time and say, let's make sure this is right by what she wants to do. There's the value of the team is such that I don't care how smart you are as an individual. The collective is always smarter than the individual. I've had the good fortune of working on all the Olympic projects for Coca-Cola since the 96 Olympics in Atlanta. And I also work on all the FIFA World Cups for them, doing their activation around those events since 1998 for FIFA. Well, I worked on the FIFA World Cup in Brazil in 2014. Great. So I spent 2 years planning that project, working on the weekly updates, working on and off with them for over 2 years. So I knew the people, I knew the processes, I knew the regulatory things that were going on. I really knew how to activate in a country like that. And then based on my overall knowledge of Olympic planning, going back to 1994, planning the 96 Olympics, there's no doubt in my mind that I could have gone off in a vacuum based on my overall knowledge of Olympics for Coca-Cola and my specific knowledge of having been a part of the Brazil 2014 FIFA World Cup. I could have built a pretty solid plan for the Rio 2016 Summer Olympics. But that would never have worked because I think you actually said it. It would never be their plan, it would only be my plan. And people would look at the plan and go, when you try to present it, this is one of the things I hate. Well, we'll just socialize it. No, Because here's what, okay, these things look great on paper. I live in the real world. And what happens in the real with real people is they get this email and they say, I'll get to it eventually. And then finally they go, I'm sure it's fine. Clint's done this for so long. I'm sure he knows what he's talking about. And they just say, oh, yeah, it looks good. And so there's no critical thinking that goes into it that says, hey, Clint, you know what? In 2 years you weren't here. We have 3 new regulatory things that have happened. Or one of the things that happened as a result of the 2014 FIFA World Cup led to this change in the way we do things for 2016. So you can't do it that way anymore. The people are different. So their strengths are different. Their durations are different. The way they do things are different. So I may build a pretty good plan for Clint Padgett to do the Olympics, but that's not the one doing it. So you have to make it has to be the people that build their plan for their project. So I don't know if that's a kind of a long-winded answer, but that's how I look at it.
I think it's really good. It's just getting your head around, what does this all really mean? And I'm of the belief that everyone should come to work, thinking about how can I create more value for the organization and all the stakeholders, which includes themselves, the employees, shareholders, customers, everything that goes in there. And I've been a big believer in, enjoy value. For me personally, I love strategy and execution equally. Like they're so important.
You're
And
a unicorn.
one of my one of my internal maxims or mantras is do less better. And so it's like organizing all this stuff. I can list out 1,000 projects, but there's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 that'll create more value than maybe all the others combined, in there, and figuring that out. So when you put the projects together, how do you recommend sort of organizing it and doing more worse as opposed to less better? The way I think about it, the value of a project.
So I think first of all, that's kind of the missing point of all this is, and I've done this for a long time. My company's done it for a long time. What I'll say is, not very many people do what you just described, which is prioritize. Everybody says we'll get it all done, and we'll keep throwing things under the pile, and it's all top priority. Well, look, if it's all top priority, the truth is it's all the same priority. Therefore, nothing is top priority. So what you want is, if somebody in the organization, you want the organization to be mature enough that somebody's doing what you just articulated, which is saying, we have 45 projects that are in the pipeline, but these 3 are the 3 that if we don't get these right, we won't have a company, or we won't make our numbers to Wall Street, or we won't, whatever that is, right? And the rest of these we'll just filter in as we have the resources available to do them. But somebody has to be prioritizing them. And most companies, my experience has meant they don't. They just everything's top priority and everybody just works hard at it. And that's not the way to go. So what we need is somebody to do what you were talking about, which is looking at the project pipeline and saying, these are the ones, they're all important. Clearly we would be doing them. They all have some ROI, but boy, these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever that is. These are the most important ones in this order that we need to get these done. And if we have people left over, then we can apply them to the other projects. And the other beauty of doing planning is knowing if you have a critical resource, right? A key resource that is used across multiple projects that is kind of a linchpin. Then if you don't have to resource load your project, but if you can just get that activity manager level, that responsible level in the plan, I can look at everything on your plate in a certain slice of time and go, Lee's got a little bit of flexibility here. So we maybe can add this other project, or he's got no flexibility. And in fact, he's on all 4 critical projects that if we don't get them done, so now we need to go find some relief. We got to get Lee some help, or we got to see if we can outsource this, or now we have to say the priority is 1 and 2. And these other 3 or 4 priorities are going to have to push because Lee's on those, and unfortunately his task on the critical path. So if they're late, we just know it's going to be late. But it also helps us know which critical resources we need to go find some additional help for, whether that's outside help or develop something internally for.
Yeah. And I believe everything an organization does should be done to, at least with the intent to make it measurably better. And it's amazing to me that so many companies don't even take a decent shot at the ROI. And even because and I love the work that I get to do, working with startups all the way to 60 billion plus market cap companies. I look at strategic initiatives and I ask the question, what's the ROI on this? And I rarely get a good answer. What does your experience tell you about why that is?
So one of the things we do is we have a document called a project charter. And one of the pieces of the charter is what we call the time cost trade-off. And it's just another way maybe of saying ROI. But what we try to get the answer is, if we need to save a day on this project, and I tell you that I can do that, but it's $150,000, you might say, oh, that's too much. Well, I've seen projects where $150,000 to save a day was absolutely worth it. And I've seen other projects where to spend $30 to save a day would not have been worth it because the value of the time wasn't that much on that project. So we need to know, in order to compress the project back, to meet our deadlines, to keep us on track, you have to make decisions, whether that is to bring in additional resources, run a second shift, run a third shift, work a weekend, outsource it, bring in some new equipment, whatever that might be. There's a cost associated with that. And I need to know and understand what is the value of saving a day on the project so that I'll know how much I can spend to compress the project. I've seen a project where they had to air freight concrete block to a construction site. And that is not the recommended shipping method. It's incredibly expensive, but the cost of doing that, while very high, was less than the cost of opening the hotel late. Right. And so it was a hotel. It was a special brick needed for the facade of the hotel that didn't get ordered with the rest of the package. By the time they realized it wasn't ordered, the only way to get it there was to air freight it and be able to open on time. Now, what would have been better is to truck ship it and still open the hotel on time. But they missed the deadline for that. So basically the cost of air freight, while expensive, was less than the opportunity cost of opening the hotel late. So we have to figure, it's hard, but you have to keep pushing people to get these numbers. And that's sometimes it's difficult because nobody wants to tell me exactly what Lee makes. So, okay, well, Lee's a engineer 2. So what does the engineer 2 burden rate look like? I don't need to know people's specific salaries. But then why are we doing this project? Kind of coming back to what you said before. If it's a new product, there should be some prediction of volume you're going to sell in the market at some margin. And that tells me for every day that I'm late, that's how many sales I would lose. And then some people say, oh, it's just sales delayed. No, because they might buy from their competitor. You may never get that sale back. So you have to figure that out. And it's not always easy, but you have to push. And sometimes you have to get HR involved to get burden rates. You have to get sales involved. Sometimes they're easy, Lee. To be honest with you, I've worked on some projects where it was a warranty project. And they knew exactly how many pieces they sold every day. They knew exactly what the average warranty repair cost was. So it's pretty easy to figure out. Every day I don't fix this problem, it's costing us $60,000 in warranty repair cost. So that's a pretty easy project, but some are more difficult when it's a new product that's being developed potentially.
Yeah, for sure. I love the concept, and it kind of goes to, I hear people, oh, we have plenty of time. We'll be able to get to it. And you have this concept of shifting the worry curve. If you can do it, I'll do it now is kind of how I think about it, because you never know what's going to come up and you don't want to be stuck with that. But talk about shifting the worry curve and what that means.
So it's really great if you get a chance to look at it in the book, or you can go to our website and download the white paper as well. But it's better when you see it visually. But shifting the worry curve is philosophically is this. Most people have this tendency of, we don't need to plan. We got plenty of time. The deadline's a year off in the future. I can do anything in a year. I got 5 other projects I'm working on right now. And so the analogy I like to use is, here at Acme Corporation, and I like to use Acme Corporation as my company because if you're of a certain age, you know that Acme Corporation is where the Wile E. Coyote bought all the stuff to get the Roadrunner, which never works. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay. That's not germane to the story. Anyway, so I work for Acme Corporation, and here at Acme Corporation, we have no formal planning process. Everything's top priority. It's going to make it happen. And we have this kickoff meeting by the business unit vice president who spends 30 minutes talking about how important this project is. And you guys all know your jobs. Go make it happen. I want to see some real teamwork on this one, right? So when you walked into that meeting, you walked in with 5 projects already on your plate in various stages of completion. Some are just starting, some are in the middle, and some are going to hopefully be closing out soon. And 30 minutes later, you walk out of the meeting with project number 6 on your plate. Now, you've not been assigned any task. You just know you're on the team, and you know the deadline's a year in the future. So your level of worry about this project probably isn't very high, because you're more worried about the other 5 projects you've been getting beat up about for weeks or months. You've got something for those things due tomorrow and the next week and the next week. I got a year for this. There's no plan. There's been no talk about getting a plan. All I know is I'm on the team. I got a year. I'm going to get to it. My best intentions, I'm going to get to it. And so we start that off. We call that first phase uninformed optimism. I don't know enough to be scared. I just know I'm on the team and I got 12 months. We create life in about 9.5 months. I'm pretty sure I could do a project in 12, right? I used to say 9 months, and my life informed me it's not 9. So not now it's longer than 9. We'll give it 9.5. So, and that's the first phase. But then what happens is about 3, 4 months into the project, remember this is a year-long project, I still haven't been able to focus much attention to it. And my level of worry begins to rise. My gut's telling me, I haven't done anything the last 3 months, and I probably should have gotten something done. This is where all the emails start to fly back and forth that all say the same thing, which is this project's in trouble, but it ain't my fault. This is when you see your one of your teammates walking down the hallway, and you hope they don't bring up the project. And if they do bring up the project, what you also hope is they haven't worked on it either, because you haven't worked on it. And let's be honest, it's okay to be late on something as long as somebody else is more late than you are. You just don't want to be most late. That's when you get really in trouble. So we call the second phase vague concern. My spidey sense is tingly, telling me something is awry, but I can't prove I'm late because I don't have a plan to measure it against. It's just my experience. My gut tells me we're in trouble. And then we move into the third and final phase of the project, which everybody knows is called the panic phase. And the panic phase is where you end up finishing the project late. It limps across the finish line. The quality suffers because you just put something out to get it out the door, and the costs go through the roof because you just thrown money at it to get it done. This is where you air freight concrete block. You just do crazy things just to get it across the finish line. And so when the panic phase happens, nothing good happens because you waste money, you cut quality, and you probably still get it done late. So the idea behind shifting the worry curve is to say, look, I know you guys are busy with 5 other projects, and I know this is going to come across as crazy to you, but I need you to carve out 2-3 days, come with me, and let's pull everybody together. And this is going to save us. I hear what you're saying. And yeah, it's you could be doing real work. I get it. But the investment we make in this 2 or 3 days is going to solve so many questions or answer so many questions, solve so many problems before they even have a chance to hurt us, and allow us to hit the deadline. And plus, by doing this, you'll know for this project when you've got time to go work on other things. And you'll know for this project what you've got to get done by a certain date, or you're going to be the headline of why we're late on the project. And that to do that might take only 2 or 3 days, but the benefit of that is so much greater than the cost involved. What we're doing, we're shifting the worry curve, and we're worrying earlier in the project as opposed to worrying later in the project.
Yeah, that upfront piece so important. Identifying what winning looks like, but also as I'm translating it into my experience, we're identifying all of the known critical milestones, and getting people to take these on, own them, come back with their own plans, and then piecing this thing together. Okay, now this is what's realistically possible. I believe in stretch, but realistic, not sandbagging.
Yep.
This concept of known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and building a flexible enough system to be able to address it. And this is challenging for me because every time you talk, I'm bouncing all through your book and thinking, oh my gosh, where do I want to go with this? There's so many places to go. But talk about that, having a system that can handle the stress of the known unknowns that we know are going to come up, but we'll figure it out, and the unknown unknowns.
Yeah. So, a plan, like we talked about earlier, a plan is never cast in stone. It's going to change over time. And so there are things I'll know at the beginning of a project that I don't know, and I can plan for them, right? So one of those might be rain. Let's say this task happens outdoors, and I can't work on it when it rains. So not only do I need 20 days, I need 20 dry days. Well, I don't know exactly at the beginning of planning. I don't even know when that task is going to happen yet. I got to get through all the planning first. And if it's summertime, it might rain more than if it's wintertime, or vice versa. So we have to make our best guess. What does average rainfall look like annually at this location that we're going to be working in? Let's say it rains on average a day a week. Well, 20 days is 4 weeks. That's a 1 day a week for rain. So we're going to put 24 in to capture the 4 days, 4 extra days for the rain situation that comes up. But as we begin to work on the project and that task gets closer to us, now we find out we're in a rainy season. We need more time to get that task done. Or maybe it's a drought currently, and we need less time to get that task done. So we're constantly looking at what's coming and making revisions. One of the things is we don't need to be perfect when we plan. That doesn't mean you could throw dart at a dartboard, but you got to get started with something and get rolling, and then we can make it perfect. The only perfect plan you ever have is the one that you've completed the project for, because now you know who got sick, how long they were out, et cetera. So one of the things we can count for, like whether you can kind of build that in the very beginning, right? The other thing you cannot count for is, like I said, we talked, I just mentioned it briefly, but basically I know that on a project of any size or complexity, somebody's going to get sick. I don't know who, when, and for how long. So I can't plan for that in advance. But what can happen is if I have a plan that when Fred says, hey, my dad's sick, I got to go home for a while, I can look at all the things on Fred's plate, that 2-week window. If he's going to be gone for 2 weeks, I can say, well, what does Fred have in the next 2 weeks? Ooh, some of these are okay. They can be 2 weeks moved and it won't hurt us. But boy, this one task is actually on the critical path, or it's only 1 day away from being critical. So if Fred's gone for 2 weeks, it'll push us out. So then the question is, Fred, who can work on this task for you while you're gone? Here's a situation I couldn't plan for it in advance, but I was able to address it once I found out what the issue was, right? And both of those were known unknowns, things I know that I don't know. The unknown unknown is something you could never plan for, is a catastrophe that happens. The plant you were getting stuff from, there was an earthquake in the region or fire, whatever, destroyed it. Those are things you can't plan for. I did a project for we were building an ag tractor from the ground up. And this company's design process was basically a 4-pass process where they did proof design first. They would design it, build one proof design machine, do some testing on it, learn something from it. Then they would modify the design and build prototype machines, maybe 5 or 10 of those, and do more testing, maybe do some shake table tests, maybe bring a customer in to look at it, do some more refinements. Then they would build pilot machines, which is something they would actually sell to final customers at a reduced price. And this is in the ag industry, and they would do what they call field follow for a year. They would let the farmer have it for a year and then learn over the year what the problems were, make the corrective action, and then go to production. So the proof design machine usually has stuff on it that is one of a kind. You just made it just for this just to prove the design. And the company, the plant we're building it in was in DeKalb, Illinois. And so the tractor trailer truck delivering the transmission, the one of a kind transmission in the world for this, jackknifes, and the transmission rolls off and gets destroyed. I could promise you I did not have a backup plan for that happening in the project. Nobody would expect that to happen, right? You would have a plan that was just unwieldy if you made it for every single possible risk that could ever possibly happen. But that's okay. So what we did was we said, here's an unknown. We never saw this happening. So we sent one crew to the wreck site basically to get all the parts and see if there was some way they could cobble it back together, at least enough to do our proof design. We didn't think that was going to work. So we had another group that went out and did a survey of the universe of transmissions that we could get and see if there's something we could modify to make it fit. And we didn't think that was going to work either. So we had a third one that went out and looked to see if there was something, like a third option we could do. And none of those worked. So we go back to management and say, listen, we know that you heard about what happened to the transmission, and we really need to push this project for a little bit. And in ag industry is interesting in that they have a selling window. And if you're going to miss that window, you need to go ahead and move you can release in the middle of winter, nobody's going to buy it. So what's the point? And we said, we'd like to move it to the next selling window. And management, being very accommodating, said, absolutely not. You're not going to do that. We've already made announcements to the farmers. You've got to hit the deadline. And my least favorite phrase in project management, make it happen. Make it happen is just code for you and I both know it's not going to work, but I'm going to hold you accountable for it anyway. So we went back and we were beating our head against the walls. And finally, somebody on the team, well, I wish I could say it was me, but it was not, said, we can make the deadline if we go from a 4-pass process to a 3-pass process. If we drop one of these 4 iterations, we can meet the deadline. So we looked at it. We said, what's the least risky one that we can drop? And went back to management. So we still prefer you let us move the deadline, but if that won't work, then here's what we can do. We'll go to a 3-pass process. Here are the risks you have to agree to take on, because here's the risks that are going to come with this. There's a reason it's a 4-pass process in the first place, and you have to agree to these risks. And that's what we did. And it ended up being successful. But that was an unknown, something I could never plan for. It would never plan for again, because it never happened. It's only happened once in 30 plus years.
Yeah. I find they happen almost every time, but rarely are they giant. But I think the value in what you're talking about, at least for me, is just having that mindset. We have the known unknowns, and they're probably going to be unknown unknowns. And when they come up, don't everybody freak out. That's why we have this project management team and all these stakeholders to deal with that. And we're all driving towards this particular end result. So this time is going by really fast. I'd like to dig into building the right team. So from the front lines in the real world, I operate 2 companies today as CEO, several companies I'm invested in. So I have a toe in the water on all of those on strategy and how they execute. Now, when you have project management teams, building the right team, super important. And occasionally I have people that say, I've got this, everything's great, it's amazing, but then you discover they're not capable, but they want to stay in the game. What's your advice for identifying that quickly and the best way to kind of move through that?
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to when you're doing the planning, it'll become pretty obvious if somebody doesn't have the knowledge to keep us moving. And so it's okay to have some, 1 or 2 new people, because that's how you have. They need to be the expert in 10 years. Okay, they need to be new, right? And the rest of the team will have to help them and support them as they learn. But you'll get an idea pretty quickly during planning when you ask somebody what's the process. If they can't articulate it, then we either need to get somebody else to help this person, or we need to find a different person because they're not the right person. And I'm going to take it up a step. The other thing that happens a lot of times is, let me go back actually. So that's during the planning. Then during the control process, one of the things about accountability is the team holds each other accountable. So if somebody tries to sandbag, like you were saying earlier, which by the way, I don't find happens as often as everybody worries about it. What I find is the opposite. I find people are overly optimistic when they plan. They think they're going to get it done in only 2 days when everybody knows it's going to take more like 5. But either way, you got to get the right duration, right? And so we'll challenge them during planning on that. And we being the team will challenge each other. And then in the control process, things are going to be late. And it's okay because, like I said, 90% of the task, if they're late, it's probably okay. It's this 10% you have to worry about. Not that you don't worry about all of them, but you really focus on those. And then if somebody tries to sandbag and say it's done, there are 20 other people on the team that go, no, it's not. It's not done because I can't do my work and I'm waiting on you to finish. And so that nobody wants to come in and they know they're going to get called out on it. So that's another thing. If people aren't able to do the work along the way, then I could pull them up and say, hey, I noticed that the last 3 tasks you've really been struggling with, this is not done in front of anybody. This is just one-on-one. What's really happening here? And sometimes I'll open up and say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm lost on this task. Or they'll say, my boss told me your project's not a priority and I can only work on it when I have time. The fact that I'm getting anything done at all for you, Clint, is because I like you. Otherwise, you wouldn't get anything from out of me. So now I know I need to go or talk to my sponsor and say, I need to get Fred realigned on this project or whatever that might be, right? So that's during the planning piece. And I want to bring in something you mentioned way early on. We like to bring the team in early, even during the, building the charter piece, because if I know why you want to do something, I'm able to help you get there. But if you just tell me, Clint, turn left, I'll turn left. I'm going to do what you tell me to do. But if I know why you want me to turn, I'll say, why you want me to turn left here? What's going on? Well, Clint, it's 4:00 on Friday afternoon and I'm trying to get to Atlanta airport. And I heard that going left is the best way to do that. No. Okay. Any other day of Friday, that would be true. But today, it's not the case. I go to the airport every Friday, so we need to go right. So if I know why we're doing something, and to put it in your words, if I know what the end of the project needs to look like, then I can give you some advice on how we might get there, as opposed to just being an automaton that just says, go left. Okay, I go left. That's labor, but it's not really helpful, right? So bringing the team in or getting them together early so they are part of the why, even though they don't control the why, at least if they know why we're doing something, you'll have a better chance of getting it done.
Yeah, and they make better decisions. In the book, you talk about supporting your team without micromanaging. And curious, to get your advice on what do you look at from a metric standpoint to make sure somebody doesn't have a ball that they don't know how to run with any longer than they have to, than it has to go on.
So obviously the one that comes up, the metric that is easily accessible through software is called total slack or total float. And that is basically how much flexibility I have before the project is late. And so if the number is 0, it means that it's on the critical path. So if it's late, the project's late. If it's got a +5 on it, it means it could be 5 days late before it makes the project late. And if it's got a negative on it, it means we're in trouble. It's already making us late. So one of the things we can look at is I can look at individuals, and when I'm doing the updates every week, I can see which people are delivering consistently late. And if it happens once or twice, it's not a big deal because I understand that people have shifting priorities. I get that. People may be sick, vacation could have happened, whatever. But if it happens consistently over a period of time, and I'm watching that person consistently deliver late, and I'm watching the flexibility, I don't want to get overly technical. This is called a flexibility. I'm watching the flexibility they have continuously go down, which means they're getting closer and closer to making the project late. Then I'm able to pull them aside and have these conversations about, what can I do to help you? That's really the answer or question I'm trying to ask is, what can I do to help you? Is it then I got to figure out, is it an education piece? Do they need a mentor that can help them? Because maybe they are new to the team or new to the project. They don't know what they're doing. Maybe they are very confident. I probably get myself in trouble here. My wife is not always right, but she's 100% confident. Right. So maybe they're super confident, but they're wrong. And I need a mentor to come in and say, hey, I appreciate that confidence. We need that. But this is not one of those situations you can fake it till you make it. This is important. And so it's having enough knowledge to be able to make those, to be able to see that happening in people.
Yeah. And I guess my advice in that area is be realistic and honest about your capability and where you're at before you dig too deep of a hole, because that can go sideways, for the individual.
Yeah, I think it's important. Let me touch on that real quick, because you as a team member, as a project manager or a leader in your organization, you have to create an environment where the truth is acceptable, right? Because if I'm okay with bad news, and if I'm not getting bad news, and I know somebody's being lying to me, because projects don't always go perfectly. They rarely do. So I expect bad news, and I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is bad news you've known about for weeks that you were hoping to fix, so I never learned about it. And now I'm finding out when I have 6 weeks less of things I can do to fix it. Right. So you want to create an environment where people are willing to tell you the bad news up front. You have to make sure they understand, I'm not going to beat you up for bad news. That's just called life. What I am going to get upset about is if you try to hide it from me, because your ability to fix it isn't as great as you seem to think it is. And I'm going to learn about it anyway. So let's just get it up front and get it out as early as possible, so we have multiple options to solve it. Every day that you don't tell me is a day less of options, one less thing on the plate I can do to fix it.
Yeah. I love that. I also find a lot of team members come in and they were trained very poorly in other company cultures where they do want to hide, and they just assume all leaders will punish news that they don't like, essentially. So do you have a checklist? It probably goes in that initial meeting that you're talking about. Hey, these are the rules of engagement. These are going to drive the behaviors, the actions, attitudes, beliefs about our ability to accomplish this stuff. Like untraining them. I used to teach martial arts, and when I get black belts in from other schools, like, oh, this is way harder than a white belt if they've been practicing wrong to try to change things. But you get team members that come in from other companies, and they've been horrible cultures that they come from. How do you get them on the right track quickly?
Yeah, it's funny because when I teach Microsoft project classes and somebody will come in and say, I have no knowledge, I'm like, thank goodness, you're the perfect one. You got no bad habits to undo first, right? So I think the thing is, the first project when you're first trying to roll out a new process is always the hardest one, because people say, yeah, Clint, you say things like I could change my duration later, but my whole experience at Acme Corporation has been, when I tell you 5 days, it's cast in stone. You used to beat me over the head with for the remainder of the project. Or my whole life experience in my former company is, if somebody says we're doing project management, it just means I was going to feel pain. I was going to get blamed for something. So their first project is always the hardest one. But if you've been doing the process at your company for a while, they'll have friends on maybe they're new, but they'll develop friends who'll be able to say, no, truthfully, you can do this. You could change your durations later. You're not going to get beat up unless you don't tell us the truth. But the first time at a new company, when everybody's learning, that's always the hardest one. And once you get past the first one, and people see that you are going to live up to what you say, and you are going to let them change their durations, you are going to let them change the order they do things in, you're not going to beat them up for bad news that they tell you up front, then they say, okay, now I'm comfortable in this environment. But you got to get that trust on the first project, and that's always the hardest one.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always want the real news. Tell me what reality is. I don't care what it is. I want to know what it is, as long as we're doing the right work and nobody's hiding anything. If they're not doing the work and they're hiding stuff, that's just not going to work. And we need to make a change there.
When you say realistic, I love that. That's my favorite term, because I tell people all the time, don't give me best case, give me worst case. Give me what is most likely going to happen. That's what we're going to plan for. And if things don't go as well, we'll adjust. If things go better, we'll also adjust. But let's plan for what's most likely going to happen. And that it's so funny. I have one client where they'll say, well, I'll say, how long do you need for this? And they'll say, well, how long do I have? I'm like, no, that's not the question. The question is, do you achieve this level of quality that's acceptable to do this task in your current environment? How long do you need? Well, how long do I have? No. And we get this, and I usually win the argument. Just forget everything else. For this task, with your current availability, an hour a week, whatever that looks like, how long to get it done? And that's what we're going to put in as a placeholder, and we'll adjust it if we need to. But it's sometimes hard to get people off of that. I was going to make it fit in a box. Well, you can make it fit in a box, but the truth of the physics of nature say that time, cost, quality, these three things are related. And if you want to make this, you want to speed it up, make it fit in a 5-day box, you're going to do one of two things. Either you're going to spend money on it to make it happen faster, or you're going to reduce the quality to make it fit in that 5-day window. And what I'm asking is, how long do you need to get the right level of quality? Not perfection, but the right level of quality.
Yeah, makes total sense. Your previous book, Project Success Method, I've downloaded, haven't read it yet, but I fully intend to read it here in the next week. We only have a few minutes left, but at a high level, describe why our listeners should actually take a look at reading that book.
So the two books go really well hand in hand. The Project Success Method, I developed that, I wrote that back in 2009. And that's really more of the tactical nuts and bolts of how do you plan a project? What is the duration? What's a predecessor and successor? Really more of the how do you get it done stuff. And that book actually gets used in a lot of college courses on managing projects. The second book, How Teams Triumph, is more about the people side of managing projects, but they make a great combination. So the first book is really more around what is the duration? How do I do it? It's really to educate you on how to plan a project at the very beginning, and then keep it on track.
Yeah, I love the idea of having a common language around creating value, completing projects, creating value holistically within the organization, all of it. And without it, you can have, if you have 10 leaders, 100 leaders, 1,000 leaders, you could have that many completely different ways of creating value. And that's not nearly as effective in my view.
No.
Any final thoughts or takeaways from this conversation that you want to share?
I think another one you just touched on was you need a common language. That's another reason to untrain the people that are new, or retrain the people that have been there a while, but have kind of deviated. We always know that also happens is you start off with your North Star, then suddenly things over time tend to drift. I work better with my left hand, so I'm always going left when you really should be staying center. So the common language is important, making sure you all speak a common language, and understanding that project work doesn't have to be punitive. Right. In fact, if it's punitive, it's not being done right. To me, project work is pulling people together into a team, having them collaboratively to build a realistic plan that they are going to hold themselves accountable for. In my world, if a project manager disappeared for 6 weeks, it wouldn't matter because the people know what to work on. They're going to hold themselves accountable. They know what the task was. They don't need me there riding herd. My job as a project manager is not to micromanage. It is to say, what obstacles are you facing that you need my help with? That's all I'm there.
That's perfect. And all of this for me is just more effectively creating an increase in value over time.
Absolutely.
And it's so important, all this work. If our listeners want to learn more about your work or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
They can go to my website, clintonpadgett.com, or the company is projectsuccess.com. And then, of course, I'm on Amazon. I'm on LinkedIn, Clint.Padgett. So any of those will work.
All right. Well, Clint, I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we get a chance to continue it sometime in the future. Thanks for being here, man.
No, it's my pleasure, Lee. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, I certainly have. Please subscribe, and if you would consider it, leave a review. And until next time, show your value to the world.